Floki, you crazy.
Life try. Every night. Welcome to another episode of Mentors Mentality. My name is Sabelo Shongwane, otherwise known as Coach Sabza. All right, today's topic, very personal, I would say, and just to elaborate on that, I would say a lot of the things that I do today when it comes to self-care, self-awareness, stem from this topic, which is know it, don't believe it. Or rather, understanding the difference between the two, for some may be important to help you get the point that I'm trying to make. And as always, I'm going to make some examples using a soccer experience. In this sense, it's not so much a soccer experience, but it always aligns with soccer, right? In translation to that, I will make a life example or tell you of a life experience that I had that aligns with the know it, don't believe it aspect of the topic. So I want to say I went through my college years preparing myself to play professional. And this is from 2009 to 2014. And so I remember in 2012, I was in South Africa, visiting home, and I was talking to my middle brother. And so Saki is my middle brother's name. And so Saki is, just to give you a little bit of background on Saki, not too much, because I'm not really sure he'd appreciate too much detail about his life. But he's a very self-conscious person. He's a strong-willed person as well. He is very, what can I say? He's not part of the herd, right? He's not a follower, definitely not a follower. And so with having him in my life, the advantage of that is that with having older brothers, I learned a lot from just watching them be, right? And so I learned from them and tried to see where they did the right things, where they did the wrong things, and how I can take the right and not the wrong, and how I can learn from the wrong and grow to be a better member of society than they would be. But not necessarily to compete with any of my brothers, but just to complement the representation of my family from me regarding how I interact with the rest of the world, right? And so being African, that's something that we're always raised to understand, know, and represent, is an extension of our family and what it means to be. I'm a Shongwane, so what it means to be a Shongwane specifically is always something, embedded in us. So I was talking to him, just to go back to the point, I was talking to him about my experience in soccer and the things that I had experienced in America compared to the things that I had experienced in South Africa, and what I foresee for myself or saw coming in my career, the direction I was taking. So he would always just get some feedback from me on, we'd sit down and have these conversations. So how far are you from reaching your goal? And I would tell him, this is where I think I'm at. And so this one day, I remember it vividly because he said to me, "Can I ask you a question?" I said, "Yeah, of course." And he said, "Do you believe that you're a good player, or do you know it?" And so I thought to myself, I was like, man, this guy's always got some tricky questions. And my friends will attest to this. My brother will always ask something that's very simple, but it's so profound. And so I was like, well, I believe I'm a good player, of course. I believe I can be better. I know that I can be better. And he was like, well, do you believe that you're good, or do you know that you're good? And I was like, it's the same thing. And he was like, no, there's a difference, right? I may have mentioned this in previous podcasts, but I never really detailed the point or what I learned from it. So I remember many times I sat on this thought and I wondered, like, what is he saying? What does he mean? Right? And, years passed and I figured it out. There's power in knowing. And this is why I want to discuss that with you today. The power of knowing and believing, right? So believing, in my opinion, comes from outside forces to you. And that builds that sense of belief. Meaning, if a lot of people believe in you, you start to believe in yourself even when you don't, right? If a lot of people believe in you, you see that belief exist outside of you, and so you can let it in. Knowing, on the other hand, starts from within and then goes out to the rest of the world. And funny enough, the knowing side of it will almost have less people believing in you because of your belief in yourself, until a certain point where their opinion and their belief no longer matters because the masses have agreed that you are who you say you are, or what you say you are, or what you stand for, right? And so examples of that would be like, I'll start with a personal example, and then I'll just use some generic ones. But an example of it would be, I heard a lot of people telling me, how good of a player I was. But for a while, I didn't believe it because I had higher goals, higher standards. And so I didn't care to even think of do I know that I'm good? Or I never had the mindset of, I know I'm good. And then, because that seemed arrogant. And that is honestly just a negative outlook that makes me think of knowing as an arrogant approach. But over time, through meditation, isolation, and just better self-care, I would say, I've become more conscious of my day-to-day and the impact that my morning has on my afternoon, and that has on my evening, and how I take on the next day. So those little experiences of just a day have also transitioned to how I can better prepare for a week, to a month, to a year, to years, to decades, to centuries, to however long, God willing, right? And so in that train of thought, I also started to look back at my past and realize what I could have done in the past better that would benefit me more now, right? And so in knowing, I believe you need to take time in isolation and understand yourself a little bit more and accept yourself, which is key, because a lot of people fail to accept themselves because of the flaws that are there, but we all have flaws, right? So knowing yourself is going to need that isolation. It's going to need that meditation. It's going to need that self-care. It's going to need for you to dig deep so you can understand yourself first, and then start to analyze the world from that perspective and the impact that the world could have if you allow it on you, and what you stand for, what you want to see, what you know to exist for yourself, and what you would like to express for everybody else. And so the belief aspect is not as detailed. It's more so, I believe because, and your reference is usually an outside force. Whereas I know because your reference is usually an inside force. The trick is a belief, using an outside force reference for belief is because that becomes your proof. But if you know something, the only way that you have actual facts that you can stand by is if you stem it from yourself. But you can't say you know and then use an outside force reference, because that outside force reference needs to be, for the most part, accredited or whatever, respected, or whatever people may consider, or a fact, like a known fact. If it's a possibility, if it's an opinion of someone else that you take upon yourself, and therefore then there are issues in that. So you can't really express that to be something that you know, but rather you have to play it safe and express it as something that you believe, right? So another example that I could use that is not necessarily personal would be when you have gone through trial and error in anything, right? You've gone through trial and error for years, and you've noticed what that experience teaches you. You've learned from it, you've adjusted, but you still have other things that you're struggling with. And so you continue to learn and continue to try again and learn and try again and learn. There are certain things, not everything in its totality, but there are certain things that you, because of your personal experience, if you were asked or questioned about, you can state that you know what you're talking about when it comes to that specific thing because you have experienced it. But if you say you believe, even the person that you're telling has a sense of uncertainty about your statement. So they'll say, are you sure? They'll ask questions like that. If they ask, are you sure about something that is self-awareness, all you have to say is yes. You don't have to justify it, right? Because it's a self thing. But if you had to justify it, you would be comfortable, confident in your statements of why you are justifying or what you believe in or what you know, and justifying that as a fact in itself from your personal experience, right? And so the reason why I wanted to add this topic to the list of topics in the podcast is because of the power that I believe it holds, right? This self-awareness element of knowing rather than believing. And so when I experienced that transition of my life where I stopped just believing for the sake of, believing, I wanted to know. I started with myself. I spent a lot of time in meditation, a lot of time in isolation. And now I know what I know about me to the point where when I experience something from outside forces coming in, I can not only stand my ground when I need to, but I can better elaborate and express myself to get the points across so that people understand my perspective a little bit more. Whereas if I know that if it was something that I believed in and that's merely where it ends or stops, I would not be able to better detail my perspective to anybody else, but rather I would be more of a surface being, right? Someone who just lives on the surface of things, right? And I think there's power in tapping into that side of yourself, just because we all have our own X factor is what I believe in, and as human beings. And I know mine, and I just want more people to know theirs and share that with the world, right? And like I said, I've heard, even with podcasts, I've heard people say, you should start a podcast. I've wanted to. Years ago, I've wanted to. And I knew that I needed to because I wanted to express my perspective and share it with the world. But I only had moments where I would question, how deep do I want, or should I? How deep should I let everybody into my life? And can I get my point across with what I know without getting deep? And so I've had to sit on those questions with myself and figure it out for myself, by myself. And over the years, I've opened myself up to other podcasts and just listened in, not necessarily listening to what they are saying, more so listening to how they are saying it and how they are detailing it, and tones of voice, energy in those moments, speed of speech. These are things that I focused on because I wanted to know how those things relate to me and how I speak and how I express myself and how I want to express myself so that people receive my perspective as best as possible. And so I realized, like most things that I choose to be a part of, it's all honesty based. Meaning, if in some podcasts you may be watching and there may be something that disturbs the podcast, and I can take it out, I can edit it, I can do many things, right? There are tools for all those things, but I know that it will take away from the purity of you understanding where I am in my life at this point in time, and therefore it'll take away, this is what I know, it will take away the depth of the points that I'm making. I don't want to seem edited at any point in time. I don't want to seem overly structured, perfect in any way, because those are unrealistic. I want to come across as, and I want to be as real as possible. And that is why I choose to go about things the way that I do, so that you can know that what I'm telling you is what I know to be true, right? And so, like I said, I just felt that this topic was a very important one, because I believe that, there I go. I know that if I can express this to the world, somebody, someone, somewhere may come across this and therefore open up a new side to them from their perspective based on their personal experience and their actual life on a day-to-day, that could or will or may benefit mankind in the long run, short term, however you may see it. And that is the main goal of all my podcasts and most, if not everything, that I do in my life. So I hope this topic got across to you and you received it well and you learned something. And as always, like, share, comment, subscribe, all the things. But in the comments, just feel free to share what it is that you know compared to what it is that you believe. And maybe you could teach me something on that note that I may be overlooking at this point in time in my life. So maybe it's holding me back from my fullest potential. And that is something that, I would appreciate, because I want to reach, I wouldn't say full potential because that puts a ceiling on it, right? I would say mass potential while I'm on earth and expressing myself based on my experiences for the next generation. And yeah, that is all I have based on that topic today. Thank you for joining me. As always, Coach Sabza.
Floki, you crazy.
Lifetime. Every night. Outshine.